It was the biggest, most luxurious hotel in town. There was a bathhouse, a swimming pool. Every once in a while I run across things that I simply can't explain, and it makes you really think there's something to all this.
Alton, Illinois, widely known as one of the most haunted places in America. There are creepy sites all around this town. One of the creepiest buildings in Alton is the Mineral Springs Hotel. GhoSTL talks with Troy Taylor, author and expert on everything spooky and ghost-related. He runs the American Oddities Museum inside the Mineral Springs Hotel.
I collect whatever I can. We have antique Ouija boards. I kept that because I just thought it was funny.
Yeah.
You know, people like to have their picture taken
Just
in
welcomes
it. So, yeah.
the guests in.
Yeah, exactly.
I hate clowns.
I've got some clown stuff.
Hate clowns so much.
Can't help it. Gonna have some clowns. This is our mascot, Sam. I'd leave at night, I'd come back in the morning and he moved around in his case.
Nope.
No kidding.
Can you tell me a little bit about the history of the Mineral Springs Hotel?
The property was originally owned by the Lures brothers, August and Herman Lures. They were German immigrant meat packers who had been living in St. Louis and decided to come over to Alton and expand their business. This spot where the hotel is now was originally their retail operation. They had planned on building a cold storage and ice making plant here on the property. When they went to excavate, as the story goes, they uncovered a natural spring on the property, which had a very high sulfur content. So it had a pretty awful smell.
Smelled a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
Word got around about this water and it reached a hotel manager here in town. His name was August Ratz. He approached the Lures brothers and told them that if they would build a hotel to operate as a spa, that he would run it for me. He'd had experience with this kind of thing. August Ratz was quite a marketing genius. He convinced people that this water also had curative powers by drinking it. The big claim they made was that if you were drunk, that to drink a bottle of this water could make you instantly sober. And essentially they were selling it like a patent medicine. The hotel opened up and it became very successful. But over time, it got old and it got run down and it closed in the late 60s. And sat empty for years. It wouldn't reopen again until 1978, but it never reopened as a hotel. It was a shopping mall after that.
The Mineral Springs Hotel has a long history of documented hauntings. One prominent ghost is that of the Jasmine Lady.
In 1965, there was a woman named Pearl Sons who had overdosed in her room on purpose. She had a long history of mental illness, unfortunately. She died here in the building. Interestingly, she sort of became the source for what was the most famous ghost in the building for quite a number of years, and that was the Jasmine Lady. She is usually encountered around a staircase here in the hotel. Mostly, they would smell her perfume, this very strong, flowery jasmine perfume. And a lot of these people that experienced it didn't know anything about the history of the building, didn't know that there was a ghost story. But a few years ago, I met Pearl's nephew, and he was telling me stories about being a young boy and staying with Aunt Pearl every day after school. He said that it was funny because when he went home, he always had to take a bath before he could have dinner because his mom couldn't stand the smell of Pearl's perfume because it gave her a headache. Pearl would hug him all afternoon. So when he'd get home, he'd smell like Aunt Pearl, and Mom said it gave her a headache. And I asked him what kind of perfume it was, and he said, I don't know, it was something flowery. I think Mom said it was jasmine. I've come to believe that it's Pearl that is that resident ghost.
One young man's ghost has made the abandoned pool his eternal home. One
of the more famous haunted spots, again, in the building is the old swimming pool that used to be in regular use here at the hotel. And it wasn't just for guests. It was also used for swimming lessons, which is what led to the only drowning that ever occurred in the pool. He was an 18-year-old sheet metal worker from Granite City, and his name was Clarence Blair, and he had come to the Mineral Springs to try to learn how to swim. He drowned and no one noticed. He's been seen many times over the years. He actually even showed up one night on a tour that I had given, and a friend of mine that was helping me with the tour is kind of counting heads, making sure everybody is still here. And he realized that there was someone missing because he had seen a man standing down at the end of the pool before I turned the lights off, wearing tan pants and a white shirt and a tie, and this guy was gone. Now, I thought he was imagining things until a group of people on the tour said, oh, we saw him too. We do get people who will say they've had experiences while they've been here in the building. People say they've been touched, or they'll feel someone tap them on the shoulder. And there's was always one part of the swimming pool where I would encourage people to stand and then not tell them until later that that's the area where most people say they've been touched.
Rude.
Just to see if we get a reaction from anybody. I know. It's not very nice, and some of them aren't very happy about it, but I figure that that's the best way to know if you've got a real experience, if you don't know what's coming.
One final featured spirit is that of a father and husband plagued by addiction.
The only other suicide in the building, but the one that we know the most about because it was so public, it involved a man named L.M. Harwood. He had come down to the Mineral Springs because he'd heard about the fact that the water could ease your alcoholism. He came here hoping to take what they called the drunk cure, a prescribed amount of this water that was supposed to help you. And I don't think anyone ever thought that it would turn out the way that it did when they advertised it, or they probably wouldn't have done it. He quickly found out that it wasn't curing his alcoholism. His drinking had led to him losing his business, most of his money, his family, his friends, you name it. And so this was sort of a last resort for him, but he found out that it didn't work. So when he left the hotel on the day that he was supposed to check out, instead of leaving, he went over into the bar area of the hotel, which was just off the lobby here. He sat down at a table. The bartender and janitor were cleaning up from the night before. They told him it was too early to serve him, but he didn't seem bothered by this. Instead, he laid a bunch of papers on the table in front of him, which would turn out to be letters he'd written to his family and friends. And then he reached into his coat, took out a pistol, and then put it to his chest and pulled the trigger. There were stories about him remaining behind at the bar, his ghost. Even in the 70s, when they reopened this building as kind of a downtown shopping area with stores in it, the folks that ran the clothing store that was where the bar used to be initially said that they would often encounter a man that would disappear from inside their store. They would see him and he'd look completely real and solid, and when they would approach him, he would vanish. But one thing they always noticed about him was that he smelled like a distillery. I really believe that it's L.M. Harwood is the source of the story.
Even for the biggest skeptic, the spookiness of Mineral Springs can spark curiosity. If you find yourself in Alton, Illinois, be sure to say hello to some of the spooky residents at the Mineral Springs Hotel and say what's up to Sam for me. See you next time, if you dare.